Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday. It is June 1st, if you can believe it or not, and we are back after an amazing 2-week hiatus. I am Rebecca Biblioteca. I am joined, of course, by Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel. How are both of you this evening?
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Let's go right to our slides because I want to say happy Memorial Day to everybody. I want to hope that you all had an amazing Memorial Day weekend. Here are some pictures of the three of us, the co-hosts here, in case you wondered what we were doing over Memorial Day weekend. So we have Bill there on the right. Of course, that's AI, but he's told me he grilled up some burgers, so I had to make a picture. Not AI are my pictures at Disneyland. My feet are still recovering, following 3-year-olds around for 3 days. I do not recommend that to anyone. And RFM, where were you exactly? We have some lovely pictures of you and your wonderful girlfriend, Wendy, there.
I was at an undisclosed location that is not Disneyland.
Thank
or
God.
anything associated with Disney. By the way, today is, I believe, Brigham Young's birthday, so we might want to mention that.
How did I forget that? I usually celebrate it every year, June 1st.
1801, if memory serves.
That's right, 1801. I'm sure all of us have that on our calendar. There you go. All right, let's talk about very quickly. Remember how I made the joke at the end of the newscast 2 weeks ago? I said, you know what's going to happen when we go on hiatus? There's going to be more news than ever. I feel like that happened. So we have curated the top stories, some new in the last couple of days and some from a week ago that we weren't here to cover. And hopefully this will give us a good overview of everything that's been happening in the last 2 weeks. So we are going to cover Mormon LEGO scandal goes viral. I think a lot of you have been curious about this. It's a twisted tale that we're going to try to unravel. Tracking Mormon child abusers, annotations and asterisks. This is our FM story. It was a big article in the Salt Lake Tribune. We talk about this all the time, and the Tribune has also tried to, make sense of all that. RFM's going to cover that. LDS Church examined claims of ex-Arizona sheriffs sexual impropriety. This is Bill's story. I'm sure that you guys have been following this too. This has been big on the national stage. Fairview mayor is asked to leave LDS temple grounds. This is a breaking story that I'm covering that I just barely learned about when he dropped this bombshell on another podcast we were doing with him. So pretty incredible. I'm going to be talking about that. LDS Church 5th Sunday programming lesson. And we're talking about that special meeting about the Constitution Declaration of Independence. Bill is going to tell us what happened there as our faithful friends and family attended that 5th Sunday meeting yesterday. We're also going to cover Stake President embezzles $30 million to fund a lavish lifestyle. That can't happen. He's a stake president. But I'm going to talk about that and explain everything there. Mormon California bishop arrested for child abuse while he was a sitting bishop. That is a big deal. Often we cover them who have been bishops before. This allegedly happened while he was a bishop. RFM will be taking the lead on that. And then finally, a new LDS humanitarian center that looks like it's going to be pretty unique from all descriptions. So I think that's it. If you guys don't have anything else to add, we will move right in to our first story, which I am going to cover, and I'm calling it Mormon LEGO Mania. Have either of you been following this? Just up front, I'm going to ask you really quickly.
If it had involved comic books, I would have been all over this.
You would have been.
But I'm going to depend on you to give me all the details. I actually called you this morning and said, "What's going on with this? Can you just tell me?" Because it seems complicated.
It's very complicated. Have you followed it, Bill? Or are you thinking it's too complicated?
Just a tiny bit. I know the gist. Somebody's Legos were somewhere and now they're not. But other than that, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah. And what is the Mormon connection? I'm telling you, a lot of different podcasters have tried to cover this. It's kind of an ongoing story. It's convoluted. There's this crime we're going to talk about, and then there's a leap over to Utah where it really gets going. And then there's some possible connection with the LDS Church. So we'll go into all that. So first, for those of you that don't want to sit through the next 10 minutes while I explain it, I have prepared a 30-second version of what happened. You guys can time me. We're going to talk about this right out of the gate so you guys know what's happening. An elderly man consigned his expensive and extensive LEGO collection to be sold at a LEGO franchise in Oregon. owned by a Utah company. Corporate took over the franchise and the Lego set disappeared. The franchise owners and the corporate both blame the other for the disappearance. A YouTuber came across the story and produced content to raise awareness of the elderly man's stolen Legos. The YouTuber came to Utah to investigate the Utah parent company. He was arrested for stalking and trespass at a corporate employee's home. Corporate CEO and employees are LDS, as are the police in American Fork. They also may have BYU ties. Conspiracies around the police siding with fellow LDS arise and go viral due to the seeming extreme harassment of the YouTuber. That's it in a nutshell. I know, but this has just gone crazy throughout all of social media as people try to make sense of it. So I thought the best way to present it is to explain to you who the players are and what they're claiming, and then we'll jump from what happened in Oregon to how the heck it ended up in American Fork, Utah, and all went down there. So first of all, we have an elderly man, Eric Mansell. This is a picture of his son, Brian. And Brian Mansell, the son of Eric Mansell, an elderly Oregon collector, they assembled together a massive collection of Star Wars Lego sets and minifigures over many years. And they did this a legacy, pay for grandkids and kids' college. You know, collecting Star Wars Legos can be very lucrative. The family says the collection contains 780 sets and 1,200 minifigures, and it was worth between $200,000 and $250,000. So they're sitting on this collection. What do you do when you want to liquidate it? Well, that brings us to Crystal and Benjamin Gorman. They are the former franchise operators of the Salem Kaiser, Oregon, and this is the name of the store, Bricks and Minifigs. Okay, it's a franchise. Bricks are Legos. Minifigs stand for mini figures. You know, those little figures. I wish I had some of my Legos to hold up, but they're in another location. So they were running this franchise of corporate Bricks and Minifigs, and they entered into a consignment agreement with the elderly gentleman and his son. So they claim, the franchise owners, that almost all of the collection was still in the store when corporate came and took over. If you remember, I talked about that before, and we'll go into more details.
Rebecca,
yes. No, please ask all questions because it is very confusing.
Where's corporate located? Is corporate located in Utah?
Corporate is in Utah. And they have locations all over. And that's where the LDS connection is. The CEO of Bricks and Minifigs is LDS. I've checked each of the people that we're talking about, and they are LDS. So this is where the conspiracy starts.
So they sell Lego, and they're very successful. And they're successful enough that they can sell franchises. And these people bought one of their franchises to sell the Lego stuff in Oregon.
That's exactly right. And that store is where the elderly gentleman consigned his Legos to. Consigning means that you say you keep them in the store, you sell them, you take a little percentage, but I will get a check from you. And it did go that way for a while until corporate came in and these guys were out and something got lost in translation. So segue right into what I'm going to talk about next. Bricks and Minifigs, known as BAM. It's a Utah-based Lego resale franchise company. And BAM argues that it never signed or approved the Mansell consignment agreement. It says, we don't know anything about this guy and his Legos. That's in Oregon. That's the franchise. We never knew anything about this, right? The company says that any arrangement was a private deal between the elderly gentleman and the local Oregon franchise owner, and that such a consignment arrangement is actually prohibited under the franchise rules. So they're basically saying, we don't know what they did there. That's maybe one of the reasons why we yanked their franchise, but we have no knowledge and we would not have approved this. This is not how we operate. So here is the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs who lives in Utah. His name is Ammon McNeff. One of the funnier things all throughout all the social media, all the YouTube, everything, they pronounce it Amen. They, of course, are not familiar with the Book of Mormon. A lot of the research that I did was helped by our good friend Ron Jorgensen, who's been following this with like popcorn every second with updates. And he was just laughing at how it's constantly pronounced Amen, because who would know that? It's like Moroni, right? You just don't know it. Anyway, his company operates hundreds of Lego resale stores through North America. He is not accused of personally taking any Lego sets, but he's become a central figure because he's the head of the company that took over the Oregon franchise where the disputed collection was located. So the Minifigs corporate leadership is accused by the YouTuber that we're going to talk about that they knew more than they admit, or they should have ensured that the Legos, were handled appropriately in this transition of store leadership. Instead, they were lost. So this is the CEO, and he kind of is the front man. He's out there defending his company against a lot of public backlash. This is a person in the company, an employee, Joshua Johnson. As I said, all these people are LDS. He's an American Fork resident, and he is an employee of Bricks Minifigs. And he was sent down to Oregon to take over this franchise, right? So he shows up, the franchise owners are out, and he's there. Where's the collection? Does he know anything about it? Who knows what and when, right? And he is actually the victim of the stalking that's alleged to have happened here in Utah when the YouTuber that we're going to talk about in a second came to Utah to try to find out, where are this elderly man's Legos? Do you, Joshua Johnson, know anything about it? This person is Brandon Best, also LDS, another employee of Bricks Minifigs, another person that was sent to Oregon to take over that franchise. Once the franchise owners left, people wonder, does he know where the Legos are? What happened when he went to the store and took it over from the franchise owner? There's a lot of intrigue there. And I would say up front, there's no way that we could possibly cover all of this in even half an hour. Go out there and start Googling. You're going to find a lot of insider information about every detail that we bring up. Okay, so here is where it gets really interesting. You have this scenario going on in Oregon. The elderly man's Legos have disappeared. The franchise owners say, no, they were in the store. Corporate says, we never saw the Legos. Well, they start posting about it, the elderly man and his son, on social media. Have you ever heard of Ben Schneider, the reckless Ben? Have either of you heard of him? I hadn't until this.
No, I've heard of Gentle Ben, but that's the only Ben I know.
Gentle Ben. I love that show. Anyway, he is a YouTuber known for unusual investigations and stunts. He became involved after hearing Mansell's story because, it's a tragic human interest story. Elderly man who I believe is ill and needed money for medical bills too, is trying to sell his Legos and they disappear. Stolen his life savings is what this YouTuber is saying. He produced a series of videos alleging wrongdoing and attempting to pressure people involved in the dispute. His activities eventually led to criminal charges in Utah for alleged stalking, trespassing, and related offenses. He has not been convicted. And here we see on the right a picture of him being held, American Fork Police, and some Lego sets behind him. So
that isn't a real picture, though.
Yeah, it is a real picture.
So he got arrested, and the police were agreeing to just sort of pose behind it and put the Lego sets all nice on the table.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. If anybody knows, let me know in the comment. The picture is used everywhere in all news sources. I can't imagine he said, "Hold on, guys, let me put these Legos here." So I'm not sure what happened there.
My hunch is that that's the image he created for the thumbnail of his video, but that's not an actual picture of him being arrested.
Those Star Wars boxes weren't there.
I've seen other pictures. It could be a picture of him being held. He has a crew with him, a team, and they film everything. That's one of the complaints. They're going around invading privacy. Allegedly,
you can tell that's not a real picture. And by that, I mean one solid picture. It has composite pieces in it.
Yeah, and they could have added the Legos. That's probably true. So,
by the way, can we clear something up? Because something's really starting to annoy me here.
Certainly.
My nerd factor is going up to 10.
Uh-oh.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong out there in Nerdland, Legos is incorrect. That would be like saying deers. Lego is both the singular and the plural. Is that correct? Do I have my nerdiness down?
It could be true. I always said Legos when I would yell at my kids, pick up your Legos. I just stepped on them, right? Has anyone else stepped on Legos? Oh my gosh.
It hurts.
It does. I would have a hard time saying Lego, like Lego, my ego. I don't think I could do it.
I'm still having trouble finding out why it is this story is generating so much interest. Are we getting there?
We're going to get, I know, gosh, speed it up, Rebecca.
Maybe we're already there and I just don't understand. But.
No, we're going to get there, but you have to understand the backstory and in order to understand why it leapt to Utah. And that's where we're going. So what happened to this collection? The elderly man and his son say that they consigned the collection to the store. The store sold a few things and gave them a few checks, but then suddenly the ownership of the collection, it remained with the family. But when the store changed hands and corporate became involved, the collection's gone. They have no idea where it is. They try to go to the store. Everybody disavows any kind of knowledge of it. So if the Mansells still own the collection, where did the rest of the sets go, right? That's what everybody wants to know. The Mansells and their supporters, which are vast. There are, I would say, 1 million people who are concerned about this, believe that the collection was improperly retained during the business transaction. Bricks and Minifigs says the collection was largely gone before corporate ever took possession of the store. The lawsuits and related litigation are attempting to determine exactly what inventory existed, who controlled it, where it went. And I do know if you want to dig in about this transfer of ownership, there's video footage where the people from Bricks and Minifigs were aware doing inventory that there were some of the man's Legos there. So that's a whole nother story. Who knew what when? But the YouTuber is going to champion the elderly gentleman here. So Bricks and Minifigs says corporate never knew about the agreement. The agreement was unauthorized. The collection was not in the store. Again, there seems to be some footage that allegedly may dispute that. And they located a little bit of the inventory and they have been trying to return it, and they deny stealing the collection. This is what the YouTuber is saying. You know, Utah company, Mormon owned company steals old man's Legos, right? And, you know, track record, maybe some people are going to believe this, right? that somehow the LDS Church proper would be involved in this.
Rebecca, but can I ask you this?
Please do.
So is nobody contesting? I know you've got the two people who are suspected of taking it.
Yes.
Are neither of those people, corporate or the local store, the franchise, are anybody of them contesting the fact that this guy gave them all these Lego and now a lot of them are missing?
No, that is a fact. But corporate says, we don't do that kind of agreement. That's the franchise owner. Franchise owner says, yes. And we left those Legos in the store when corporate kicked us out. And so it's on them.
So my question is everybody agreed that it's not the guy who's claims to be the victim making this stuff up?
No, it's not made up. It's well documented that it was.
So then it's one of the other two who's responsible.
Yep. The bottom line is they're gone. And the reason we all know about it now is because a popular YouTuber has decided to champion this elderly gentleman. Of course, the former franchise owners say corporate knew about the collection. They took control of the store while it was still in the store. And, you know, they don't know what happened. It's out of their hands. So again, I think I've made that pretty clear. Now we'll jump to where you want to jump. Why the heck is Utah involved? Why is the Mormon Church involved? Why are the American Fork police officers involved? It only gets weirder, right? So although the collection was in Oregon, as we just described, Bricks and Minifigs corporate is headquartered in Utah. Several individuals connected to the dispute live or work in Utah. And that was that Joshua and Brandon who were sent to Oregon, you know, to organize, to take over that franchise, who some are claiming they knew those figures were in the store. Did they have something to do with it? You know, it's a very gray area. Reckless Ben's investigation shifted to Utah, where he confronted or attempted to contact the people tied to the company. And we're mostly talking about Joshua and his house in American Fork. And these actions led to a Utah criminal case. So he and his team came to Utah to try to get to the bottom of it, right? To talk to the employees, to find out what corporate knows and isn't telling. So here's an example of some of the tactics the YouTuber will use, putting up signs on some of the businesses and at people's homes, permanently closed. We stole a family's life savings, you know, this kind of thing. Negative PR.
Where's that sign?
Where is that sign? This particular one, they say, was hung on Joshua's house in American Fork. One of the reasons, or a fence near it. This is one of the reasons the police would have been called, right?
What is the they sued, we lost part? Has somebody sued?
Sued them. Yeah. Well, it's very convoluted who's trying to sue who at this point, but the YouTuber is just claiming, that they lost it. They did try to, the elderly, like I said, twist and turn. The elderly gentleman and his son did try to sue the franchise owners, and in 10 little mini suits that they won, got some money back. So they're trying to recoup it. But the YouTuber is saying it's the corporation. We're going to go after them. So according to charging documents and the article in the Tribune, Reckless Ben was not arrested for investigating the Lego dispute itself. He was arrested for actions that police say targeted a specific American Fork resident, Joshua Johnson, who works for Bricks and Minifigs. Like I said, Joshua went to Oregon, took over that franchise. YouTuber Ben has come to Utah to actually go to Joshua's house and say, we got to make this right. You got to tell us what you know. We have to solve this. Now, the YouTuber Ben Schneider says, no, he's conducting an investigation into the missing Lego collection. He's exercising free speech right. He's trying to help the Mansell family, the elderly gentleman, and he has publicly claimed that the arrests of him and harassment of people on his team were retaliation for exposing alleged wrongdoing connected to the Lego dispute. And this is how Mormonism is involved. You know, the people that Ben is trying to talk to are LDS, the police officers that the employees called are LDS. Is there a conspiracy? Are the police protecting, these residents in their homes and not taking it further and believing Reckless Ben, saying that these guys are not good guys? And I know you have something to say about this, RFM, which is a really good point. But here, to make this point, let me go ahead on my slides here since that's too small. Hold on a second here. So these are some of the things that somebody who is kind of tracking from the perspective that the police are doing something wrong. So he says on Wednesday, May 27th, the Bricks and Minifig corporate franchise, a franchise and executives at the two companies. Oh, sorry, I'm totally on the wrong page. Sorry about that. Here we go. AF police claimed that Ben didn't stop at a stop sign and pulled him over, but they showed the cop cam footage and he came to a full stop, right? There are dozens of these. The police are targeting him, allegedly. Are they? We don't know for sure. When Ben was waiting outside with an official court server to serve papers, Ben filed his own lawsuit against Joshua Johnson on behalf of the family. I know, RFM is just laughing. And he's out there trying to serve papers, right? The
problem is he has no standing to do that.
Exactly.
You have to be an aggrieved party.
I know. The cops showed up 4 times, and the third time, the police offered to serve the papers, but then they determined the papers weren't valid, and they gave them back. And then they called to verify the papers were legit. Learning they were, they decided just to arrest Ben. So it's just this cycle of Ben doing something. I know. I knew you'd get a kick out of this as a lawyer. Ben does something, and then Johnson calls the police, American Fork. They come, they try to sort through it. And, there are a lot of body cam footage available out there, and it does look like the police department may not have been exactly upfront with what was happening.
No way.
It's going to take people a long time combing through it to determine what exactly happened. So the next thing that happened is the police were told that Ben's group had stolen Legos, right? So a SWAT team was sent to their Airbnb where they were staying, and a search was made for the Legos. During the incident, Ben's shoulder was injured by aggressive police. So every time they reach out and try to do something to a corporate employee of Bricks and Minifig, the police are called. And then something else happens, it almost...
Sometimes it happens when you're resisting arrest too.
Yes. And I think that's where that other picture that I showed was from. When Ben gave up on the lawsuit, he did finally give up trying to serve those papers. They made a poster for the GoFundMe. It has a picture of Johnson's face on it. It says, I stole a man's savings. When they tried putting this up on a fence to take a picture, the police arrived and arrested everyone, putting Ben in jail with a threat that he'd be there for a month. But a judge let him out after just a week. So you can kind of see this is described from the perspective of somebody that thinks, everything Ben is doing is okay, but what the police are doing, is excessive, or they're targeting. At one point, they stopped him and searched his car for 3 hours for heroin. Is it excessive? Are they trying to
3 hours for heroin?
That's what they said. So is this trying to get what they perceive as a menace out of their community by harassment? I think there's still much more to come out in the body cam footage, but a lot of people think, okay, look, the CEO, his employees are LDS, the company's in Utah. the American Fork police are, Mormons and have BYU connections? Could it be that Whistling Whittlers, that old boys Mormon club where they protect each other and they're harassing this YouTuber? This is kind of what they think. This
my
graphic
question is separate and apart from, let's say they're all identical religions and all went to BYU and we're all in the same class together. Is this guy, Reckless Ben, a name apparently he chose for himself as opposed to Gentle Ben, Reckless Ben, is Reckless Ben objectively doing things that would subject a person to arrest in American Fork? That's the question I have.
That is the question. And I think this chart kind of shows it. And people in the comments are pointing out, and I know all this, there's some maybe falsehoods in the police reports. We're going to have to dig into all that. What did the police do to try to, get rid of this threat? But for example, on March 8th, he delivered rubber duck package with alleged fake UPS paperwork to the Johnson's home.
Okay, hang on. I don't know. What's a rubber duck package?
It's just a brown box with rubber ducks in it.
There's rubber ducks in a brown box. And who, Reckless Ben, delivers this where?
Everything's going to Johnson's house. Johnson.
And who's Johnson again? Can we go back and show me Johnson?
He's the employee who went to Oregon and took over that franchise.
Okay, but now he's back from Oregon.
Yes, exactly. So after that happened, Johnson calls the police and they do the traffic stop. They question the group. They're looking for Ben. They issue trespass warnings. So the police are doing something in reaction, to what Johnson is calling over and over, because Ben is, doing these things. So again, it's hard to say. I know there are problems with redacted body cam footage. I feel like maybe the police have to kind of backpedal on what happened.
Hey, Bill, you're the youngest one here. Can you tell me, is there any special significance to rubber ducks?
I'm a little old for rubber ducks. I don't really know.
I remember when the song was on the radio, it was a big hit, but I don't know. It would be weird if I got a package of rubber ducks, I suppose.
Yep. So then on March 9th, somebody connected to Ben visited the Johnson home claiming to have church connections. There's a big dispute over that. A person came in, said, I'm from this ward. Bishop Johnson needs help. Again, coming to your house, Johnson calls the police. But then in the police report, there's stuff that doesn't add up, so people are really leery of this. People are going through it with a fine-tooth comb and saying what the police are saying doesn't add up. But after that, Johnson calls
Rebecca,
the police again.
Let me just state the obvious, and that is, just because it's one thing doesn't mean it's not the other.
Exactly. It could be both. It could be everything.
So that, obviously both.
Exactly. That results in another traffic stop, sobriety test, the canine search of the vehicle for heroin, and they're released without arrest. So you can see every time Reckless Ben does something, the police are called, and then they come in, and then we're just not exactly sure. It's a huge gray area what the police are doing. Again, Mormonism, the connection is, I don't know, it's interesting. On the 10th, March 10th, they photographed and monitored Johnson's residence. The team, Ben and his team, Johnson calls the police and they respond to complaints and investigate the concerns. On the 11th, they continue activities that the police are now viewing as a campaign of harassment, right? And so the police are aware of Ben. They're always trying to find out where he is, trying to track him and get him out of there.
It's a crime, by the way.
What was that?
It's a crime.
Yeah. And that's maybe what you can point out. At this point, they arrest him for stalking and related allegations. Finally, on the 11th, there's that sign that we talked about, accusing Johnson of stealing a dying man's savings. They get a search warrant. They search the Airbnb for Legos, and they arrest him a second time. So again, the police's view is it's a coordinated stalking and harassment campaign targeting Joshua Johnson and his family in American Fork. They are American Fork policemen. They are going to answer the call of this family and go there and try to protect them, right? That's the police point of view. Of course, Ben's point of view is he's an investigative journalist. His efforts are to expose what happened to the disputed Legos taken from the elderly collector. So
if Johnson were Jehovah's Witness, wouldn't we expect the police to respond the same way?
I know. So again, there are irregularities in how the police reported things, possibly adding things, taking things out that weren't there. But maybe you can speak for a second, RFM, on, somebody in American Fork feels threatened, regardless of what they did in Oregon, calls the police show up and try to handle it. What's your take on this?
Well, first off, it's very, very common for police to shade things in reports I won't say all of them. Well, I mean, yeah, kind of. Not all of them, but most. Okay. They'll shade things. Some will shade things to the point where they're actually not telling the truth. That is fortunately the minority. But so that happens. And it looks like this guy's out there spoiling to get attention, and he's getting it. And then he's trying to turn that into more attention, and people are watching. I don't see what the fascination is myself, because this is a straightforward civil suit. What happened here, whatever it is, it's Lego. Maybe that's part of the fascination. I don't know. Maybe there's big Lego interest.
And an elderly man, and being
Well,
exploited. I
sympathetic,
mean,
sure.
it has all those story parts to it.
But it's just a civil suit. And this kind of suit happens, every day across this country. These kind of civil suits get filed where there's some kind of thing like this, where it's one or the other. And now he's going to file a lawsuit. I would think one lawsuit. It's not 10 lawsuits. I don't even know what that's talking about. You do one lawsuit and then you file it against either one. And then they have to bring in the other person because they're going to file a cross claim against the third party and say, no, it's not my fault, it's their fault. Then it all gets hashed out in front of a judge, and the judge makes a determination as to which apparently of these two parties is guilty and which one owes how much. And it might share responsibility for the full 200,000, although the elderly gentleman would have the burden of proving how much they're worth in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And it is very convoluted. Someone in the chat is saying, I'm not explaining it correctly. I am explaining it correctly. And again, there's so much body cam footage. If people go through and watch that, they will kind of see what I'm talking about. When you present news, you can't come out and just say this and that. You have to be, a little more sensitive to both sides. And that's why we're talking about it in this kind of language. But yes, the body cam videos, there are hours and hours of it. And it does look like there may have been something strange going on with what the AF police were doing. And again, this is where it ties into Mormon town, Mormon CEO, Mormon cops, Mormon conspiracy. This is where
Bill,
this comes from.
I'm sorry, Rebecca. Bill, I want to ask you this question, and you too, Rebecca, because can you help me understand what I'm missing in this story and why this is becoming such a big deal?
You're missing cops behaving badly, the claim, and caught on video. Caught on video is what you're missing.
That always happens.
Yeah.
But this guy, I don't know how badly they're acting, but obviously this guy is being provocative. Police are responding. He continues to be provocative. And, police are only human too. I know they're not supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be robots. It's all supposed to be RoboCop out there. But then they've got a nuisance in the community that they're trying to get rid of, and trying to, hopefully, within the bounds of the law. But, sometimes they shade things. So I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that this guy is trying to be provocative. What do you think, Bill? What am I missing?
Yeah, well, I think on one hand, if we go back to the front half of the story, this is a business. They sell things. So the things they sell are in boxes, they're in sets, they have barcodes on them. You don't just have somebody bring something up to a counter and you're like, hey, $15, and you just take $15 and there's no written thing on a franchise, even if it's it's a franchise or if corporate's running it. Either way, there's barcodes, you're scanning things. So either A, the Legos were purchased into the store, which there should be a record of if that's the case. Doesn't sound like it's the case. In fact, I think the original franchise owner and the original owner of the Legos agreed that it was brought in on consignment. Okay. On the back end, a sale had to have happened. These are all sold individually. They're sold on eBay. They're sold over the counter. There should be a record of that. It seems like the only option is somebody came along in the middle of that transition and said, now would be the perfect moment to take all of this stuff out of here, and it's just vanished. That it's hard to believe that all just vanished. And if they found some of it, where did they find it?
Yeah.
So I think on the front end, from a business perspective, I worked in a pawn shop for 7 years. Everything we sold had a barcode. Every loan we did, every item we sold over the counter, everything we brought into the store had to be recorded and documented. So on the front end, it seems sort of strange that everybody's like, yeah, it just disappeared. That doesn't make sense. On the back end, you have this well-known, again, not to me, but to somebody, well-known YouTuber who's investigating this from out of state, comes into Utah, and he's trying to get to the bottom of it, and he's doing it in an eccentric way for sure. And it seems like the police, again, I don't have the film and I haven't watched it, but at least the allegations are that the police are going after him in a much harsher, unethical, not right way, sort of putting on him things that he's not doing in order to scare him away and send him out. And in a religion that had the whistling whittlers and the Danites chasing people out of town, maybe, and a BYU police department that has often worked on behalf of the church in ways that have been alleged to be unethical, and I think kind of were, allegedly. I'll just note, like, there's different dynamics to this that make this story, I think, interesting. And you have an old person who got taken advantage of and nobody's owning up to it. And so I think you add all those facets together and you have what is an intriguing story.
Yeah. And they do, of course, believe there was even worse behavior on the side of corporate, perhaps going in and taking over so that they don't have to pay for the Legos. There's all that kind of facet to it too. But the idea that people are saying these are church leaders, none of these employees are church leaders. I have looked them all up. These employees are all low-level callings. They are not church leaders. So it's not that. I'm not saying there's not an old boys club. There probably is, and people have come out and said, oh, people who aren't Mormon get treated a certain way by the police. Others don't, so it's all that. It's a huge hot button. And for those in the chat that are saying we are blowing the story, we are showing all perspectives on it. Don't be in a silo, right? That's exactly how it is. So anyway, he is charged finally with stalking, targeted residential picketing, criminal trespass, disorderly conduct, right? And of course, the people are saying, again, what we just talked about, Mormontown, Mormon members in the corporation who, may have done harm, Mormon policemen. Is everybody targeted? Is this person a victim? I don't know. I'll leave it to everybody to decide that. But there is a lot of body cam footage. Like you said, RFM, there's fudging that goes on. There's redacting. There's all kinds of things like that police officers will do. We don't know if this is extremely just after Ben or if this is something that happens routinely. They, of course, have come out very strongly. Let me see. Their statement is from the police. We understand that many individuals following this matter online have strong feelings regarding the underlying business dispute originating in Oregon. These concerns are understandable. However, the American Fork Police Department's responsibility is to investigate incidents within our jurisdiction and enforce the laws that apply to situations in our community. Nothing in the actions taken by our officers should be interpreted as validating, supporting, assisting, or defending any individual connected to the separate allegations being discussed online. Our involvement in these cases are limited to fulfilling our legal obligations and enforcing the Utah law based on circumstances presented to us. So I feel like RFM, if everything could be proven against Brick and Minifigs, they're the worst people in the world. They literally hand-picked up and took the collection. They haven't been arrested for that, right? That has never been decided. So American Fork Police could not go to their homes and make them do something, right? Or arrest them for that. That's not how that works. And, I know that there's some irregularities in what they're doing too, and more will come out. But you're kind of bound by what you can do, aren't you, RFM?
All I will say is it appears that this fellow Reckless Ben, who I don't know either, I said he's being provocative. What that means is he doesn't have clean hands in my book. And this is something that frequently comes up and judges talk about it, having clean hands. In other words, are you an innocent party, or did you in some way participate and provoke the situation that you are now complaining about? And it doesn't mean that you caused it, okay? It's just, did you participate? Did you involve yourself in making this happen? Except for what you did, would it not have happened? Okay. So yeah, he doesn't have clean hands. I don't have a lot of sympathy for him. He seems to have already jumped to the conclusion that Johnson is the person who did it without any kind of a jury trial or finding of any kind. And so then he wants to harass him, which he's doing by putting up these signs and generally making a nuisance of himself, as far as I can tell.
But what I want to ask you, yes, in addition to that, could the American Fork Police do anything to hold Bam or Johnson or any of the others accountable for what happened in Oregon? Could they go in there and do something?
They could. Generally, they don't. So I'm a attorney in a small county, and I can't tell you how many times the police have said that's a civil matter. All right. Generally they have their hands full.
Right.
Policing regular crimes. And by regular crimes, I mean the straightforward kind of crimes we talk about, and violent crimes and thefts, if they're very direct. Even some embezzlements they'll get involved in. But as far as these white collar types of cases, you'll see the Department of Justice prosecuting them. You'll often see the AGs in the various states, the state agencies prosecuting them, maybe really big counties, I don't know. But the smaller counties and the smaller towns that you get to, generally the police are just going to say it's a civil matter. But this kind of thing, if that's harassment, and if this is stalking, then that's something that they're going to police. And anything else, they're just going to have to file a civil case.
Yep, that's true. No, and there's footage, there's video when Josh goes down to the store, where he's like, okay, we'll make sure those Legos are taken care of and get back. So there's all that, but it's really hard for the American Fork to police to be able to cut through all that and make some kind of an arrest.
And I have another question, which is, what is it about these Lego sets is special that distinguishes them from all the other Lego sets that they had in the store?
They had labels on them, and there's photographic evidence that there were labels identifying it as the Mansell's collection. And then it looks like the labels may have been taken off. So we're not saying there wasn't bad behavior from BAM or any of the others. It just hasn't been, this has not gone to a civil suit. It isn't anything like that, right? And then you have Ben and what he's doing. So
well, I understand that this elderly gentleman, what's his name again? The guy who got his Lego taken?
Eric.
I understand he can afford an attorney to file a lawsuit at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm going to show that. That's my very last slide. So the story is full of twists and turns and different opinions. Again, the reason it has to do with Mormonism is because Mormon CEO, Mormon employees, bad behavior, like the Mormon Church, right? People are pointing out police officers in American Fork supporting bad Mormons. Is this a pattern? That's where all the intrigue comes from. But there are so many twists and turns. You really have to watch all the videos and all the body cam footage to see what the police are actually doing. So in the end, as of Wednesday, May 27th, the Bricks Minifigs corporate franchise executives of the two companies have filed a lawsuit against Reckless Ben and the man who claims that the collection was stolen. So they're reaching back out and suing, right? The plaintiffs allege that Reckless Ben and his co-defendant created online content to defraud, manipulate, threaten, trespass, extort, injure, and damage the plaintiffs, BAM. They also allege that the defendants engaged in racketeering and profiteering and other misconduct. So BAM is reaching back out and is going to sue them.
Reckless Ben was begging for a lawsuit. Reckless
Ben has left from Mexico to try to get away from all of these charges and everything that has happened here. And he did set up a GoFundMe, as you alluded to, RFM, for the elderly gentleman. It now has over $200,000 in it. And there's also a GoFundMe for the original franchise owners, who many say were forced out by corporate, right? With no warning, just completely forced out if you read those documents. And they have over $50,000 in it. So
nothing says you're innocent. Nothing says you're innocent like running to Mexico.
I don't know. Maybe someone will set up a GoFundMe for him. But it's a very twisted tale. Passions run high. Information is all out there. There's a lot to dig through. I'm sure there'll be a documentary someday. So
I'm sure.
As far as the Mormon connection, it's just like, yeah, of course they're Mormons, right? Of course, corporations behaving badly with Mormon CEO is going to be badly behaving like Mormons, and the cops are Mormons and they're behaving badly too. So, and a lot of it is documented on both sides. So that's the end of that. And everybody who told me that I'm not covering it correctly, please go out and study it for yourself. That's what we do as post-Mormons. We study things out for ourselves and come to our own conclusions. So everything I presented was just from news, the news. I didn't go into all of the videos, so didn't have time.
So, Bill, you think you might want to be running down to Mexico too? I'm getting a hankering.
Oh, that's a good segue. I like it.
Thanks.
Well, let me at least jump in and share just a couple quick thoughts. I know we spent a lot of time on this story.
But please share. Yes.
I just want to know people in the comments. So, first off, covering silly stuff like this takes pressure off the church. The church would love it if you guys spent all your time on this. I'll just say us doing the newscast has to do with all of Mormonism. anything that connects with Mormonism in some way. It doesn't always have to be about the church. And somebody else said, what does this have to do with Mormonism? Well, you have a police force that we've had past events with police force acting in ways that it seemed it seemed like they were doing, or that there were allegations that they were doing things that were playing favoritism for the church. So we have had issues with the police force before. I'll just note too that you have a Mormon-owned company. You have this taking place in Utah. You have the owner of the company being LDS. I think it has plenty of things to connect with Mormonism.
And it's Lego.
And it's Legos too. Somebody says there's so much video documentation and the cops are redacting their own body cam video to cover up their crimes. I'll just note that's what people are pointing to. And I'll just say, this is an hour and a half, 2-hour newscast. This is one story. If somebody wants the full story, you go watch 37 hours of footage and video takedown and episodes on this and episodes on that. We're just covering the bare bones as a newscast to present the story to you and hope that you do go off seeing. I will say one more thing to Catskill Girl. Thank you so much. She says, considering I planned my whole Monday night around being here, I would be remiss if I did not say thank you for all of your hard work. And I'll just say the chat is as lively as I've seen it in months.
You see, so people are interested in this.
It's a very passionate story, I'm telling you, and people are looking at all sides of it. So, but if you read some of the news articles, it's more balanced, kind of showing both sides. But then again, if you dive into Ben's videos and you look at the body cam footage, there's a lot there that make you
Let me just tell you something. Can you put that back up, Bill?
Something's up.
The Wakaka border. I'm glad it's not Bukaka border. The biggest story here is the police corruption, RFM. Let me tell you something. Police corruption is never a big story.
Exactly.
And then one other thing, let me...
what I mean is it happens all the time.
I'm going to put one more thing up and just make one last comment, and then I'll be done with this story. Again, if you're the company that comes in and you're like, this happened before we got here, then there's no reason to say that there was never a consignment agreement signed, because you came in afterward. It's not your problem anyway. It seems like these guys want to have a defense for both sides of the argument. And that to me raises a red flag. And I'll just say one more time, in the business world in 2026, anything you bring into your store as inventory, you're going to have a record that you purchased it. If you didn't purchase it, you don't have a record you purchased it, you can almost assuredly agree that that material was brought in and was not purchased as inventory by your company. Hence, it is a consignment. Second, on the way out, it had to have been sold. Unless you just said, this is taking up space, it's not worth anything, and you dumped it in the dumpster behind the store, which is a lot of Legos. If you sold it, there's a record you sold it. If you threw it away without asking anybody. I don't know.
You put it under your arm and walked out in the middle of the night, and then you sold it on eBay or someplace under a different name.
They stole it. Yeah.
Still a record of it.
There is, but how would you find? That's the question.
Yep. But again, they are none of them Mormon leaders. That was the first thing I ever checked. So they are LDS members, but not leaders.
No, they're probably too big of nerds to be Mormon leaders.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty successful business. All right. Moving upward and onward. Mexico, you mentioned that, Bill. Why don't you tell us what's going on there?
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, Mexico. Let's just say, first off, we want to just make an announcement again. The Post-Mormon Celebration Cruise. It is happening on September 13th. We embark from Long Beach, that port, getting on a Carnival cruise line, September 13th through the 20th, 8 days, 7 nights. You can see I added Dr. John Lundwall, who is now going, I believe, correct? And so we've got Radio Free Mormon, Rebecca Biblioteca, Landon Brophy, Charlie Harrell, Jana Spangler, Ganesh Cherian, Dr. Julie Hanks, Dr. Randall Bell, Dr. John Lundwall, myself, and Sam Young. And so it should be a really fun time. We hope that folks will go to this. By the way, I made a couple of images just as you guys were sharing that first story. Remember when Jacob Hansen said, on our cruise, you get spiritually fed. On theirs, you get a hangover, maybe an STD. I thought, well, you know, if he's going to say it, let's at least advertise and make a joke about it. It looks like there's STD testing available. Lots of hangovers for the front row there. And folks, if you want to be on the celebration cruise, you see the link down there at the bottom, khegsethtravel.com. Just pause your screen and type that into your browser, and you can get on this cruise. I think there's about 210 to 230 people at this point going, over 110 or 15 cabins sold. And so we'd love to see you on the cruise line with us. We're going to have a ton of fun. If you do get an STD or a hangover, that's your fault, not ours. So there you go.
I haven't had a good STD in a long time.
There you go.
There it is. All right.
I think you have the next story, RFN.
The Deep Purple slides of mine.
Here we go.
This is a big story by Tamara Kimsley of the Salt Lake Tribune. It was published May 27, 2026. It's both long and it was lengthy in the research time that she put into this. And what it is basically she wanted to find out what really is going on with this LDS Church system for tracking abusers. We hear all the time from church members or church leaders that it's the gold standard, and yet kids keep getting abused. And then her question is, does it work? So what she did was, instead of just going to the handbook or church spokespeople, she went to 4 or 5 previous stake presidents and bishops who actually have hands-on experience working with this. And there's really, I guess, nothing about it that you can't talk about. And they didn't seem to have any problem talking with her about it. So she was able to find out what really happens. And I thought this was an incredibly valuable article in that it made it much clearer to me. And I will tell you that after reading this, and if this is correct, and I presume it is, I have no reason to think it's not, the church actually may have a very good system for tracking abusers. It actually may have the gold standard of systems. The problem is that the people who are using it don't have a clue as to what they're doing. So it's like a great race car and me driving it, right? I have no idea what to do with it. So let's see what happens here with this story. I'm going to go through it quickly. I'm not doing the whole story. It was very long. I encourage you to go to the Salt Lake Tribune if you want to read the rest of this. Step 1 for any Latter-day Saint leader learning about abuse in his congregation is, per church policy, to call the faith's internal helpline, an approach that has come under fire in recent years, and for good reason. That's its own can of worms, that helpline. It's a help the church line, not a help the victim line, and often a help the abuser line. Less talked about is its one-of-a-kind system for tracking members with a history of threatening behavior so as to prevent them from serving in certain volunteer assignments, such as a young men's leader or head of youth activities. The process is housed in the faith's software for local leaders, which maintains membership records on each of the global faith's nearly 18 million adherents. So this is something local leaders can access, and obviously general authorities also have access to this. The people who don't have access are the female leaders. They can't access this. Within this system, male bishops and stake regional presidents are able to flag after obtaining church headquarters approval. So this is one of the keys that I didn't know. In order to put the flag on the abuser's membership record, you have to have church headquarters first presidency approval in the first instance. Those who confess to or are convicted of abuse, marking their membership record with a digital scarlet letter known as an annotation. In some cases, depending on leaders' judgment, credible accusations may also trigger this note, but it doesn't seem to happen very often. It's usually they'll hang around and wait for some kind of a criminal court verdict to come in before they move. They don't have to, and they don't always do. In a statement, church spokesperson Doug Anderson explained that annotations to membership records are vital administrative tools that help local leaders protect their congregations, especially children and youth, from those with a history of serious misconduct or predatory behavior. But exactly how they function and how effective they are at fulfilling this critical mission remain largely a mystery to the average member who lacks access to this database. I don't have access to this database. Starting at infancy, for those born into the church and baptism for converts, the global faith maintains a record of all its members that follows them as they move from one congregation to another. That's a lot of records. Birth, baptism, and marriage dates, names and birth dates of children, contact information. These details are contained in these digital dossiers, accessible to bishops and their clerks all the way up to the church president. If Latter-day Saints resign their membership or lose it for disciplinary reasons, their records are so noted, but remain in the system. This is true even as they cease to be counted as part of the fold. Now, I underline that. It's not underlined in the original. But at first, I had a negative response to this idea that even after people leave the church or are excommunicated, the church maintains the record of their membership. But then I thought, well, wait a second. What happens if a person then rejoins the church? And would I want them to delete their membership file if it has some kind of an annotation on it? I bet they keep them all. My comments would really apply to those with annotations, that they should keep them, and that would make sense. So that if they rejoin the church, that they're not starting with a clean slate. From the church's perspective, they still have their old annotation. The result is a massive database positioned to identify known or, in some instances, credibly accused abusers. If, say, a man loses his membership for harming a minor and seeks to join the church on the other side of the world, the records software will recognize him and alert the bishop in his new area. A literal red flag. We're not just using that, saying it's red flag. There's a literal red flag that appears on the screen of a person who has this specific annotation. According to the former bishop's interviewed, for this piece, a stake president responsible for overseeing a cluster of congregations typically initiates the process of annotating a member's record. So usually it's the stake president who starts it, though bishops can do so as well. In nearly all cases, this occurs only after a church disciplinary council. At the end, the bishop or the stake president notes the council's decision and uploads any relevant files in the church's software. Now, it's going to be easiest for most stake presidents and or bishops just to wait until there's a decision made, either at a disciplinary council or in a regular court, okay? And so there's going to be a time lag there. But some may do it before that, just based upon what they think is a credible allegation. But I got a feeling that that's going to be really the exception. And the rule are going to wait to this point. So then it gets uploaded, the decision of the disciplinary council. All of this information that's now uploaded from the stake or the ward is then reviewed by the office of the first presidency. That's how high it goes. These three men made up of the church president, currently Dallin H. Oaks, and his two counselors, are responsible for finalizing that decision. Their office, these three guys, are responsible for finalizing the decision of a stake or bishop's court in which an annotation occurs and a person is excommunicated. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Rebecca? Did you know that, Bill? I knew that they were responsible if a person wanted to appeal an excommunication, but I didn't know that they were involved regardless of whether there was an appeal.
I think every touch point, if it involves a crime like that, that they are involved. They have to say, yes, you can remove this. Yes, you can move to the next step. Don't forget, there's rebaptism, there's restoration of priesthood blessings if you're a man, then there's removal of annotation. So 3 times that the first presidency would have to be aware.
And the reason why we're covering this so carefully is not only because it's kind of clarifying, and I appreciate this article for that, but also because we're heading right toward how it impacts Wade Christofferson and what the first presidency must have been involved in his case. Did you have any thoughts about this, Bill?
No, I think but like you said, I think it's enlightening for all of us to be able to see how this process works. And I look at some of the things being said in the live chat. yeah, except, and this is what Kelly 2833 says, yeah, except only men that have access to the database know who has the annotations. Women never know. Well, it's actually worse than that. It's only a few people from every ward who could know this. So it says here 2 people, but maybe it's the full bishopric or whatnot. But as you point out, it's probably just the bishop and maybe the ward clerk. So 2 people from every ward have access to the list. It's not very comprehensive or accessible. If somebody has abused children, shouldn't every parent, shouldn't every guardian of a child know who that person is so they can keep their child safe? Instead, this list is secluded away from 99% of any given ward.
And don't forget that an annotation doesn't say what it's for. A bishop has to be proactive and call Salt Lake and find out what it's for. Then he can reveal that to others. And I even have talked to bishops who said, oh no, we never got to see that. It was only the stake president. So it's still really unclear how it works exactly.
Thank you. In the case of excommunication, an annotation appears on the membership record in the form of a literal red flag. So a person gets excommunicated. Hey, Bill, you got a red flag on your name. Hey, Rebecca, guess who has a red flag on his name? Because they still got the membership record, even though they're excommunicated. And that's what the literal red flag denotes. Said one of the former bishops. It's very hard to miss, said the man who recently finished a 10-year stint as a stake president in the South. Now, I underlined it's very hard to miss because apparently somebody missed it with regard to Wade Christofferson. That's all I'm saying at this point. So is, he said, the additional note in cases of annotations made for child abuse. So there's not just the red flag when you're excommunicated for child abuse. There's also an additional note. Warning that the member should not work with children. You see what I'm saying? Sounds like a pretty good system. And yet, go ahead.
Does the system, so let's say there's a red flag, but I don't see it. I'm the bishop. I don't notice it. I've called Brother Jones, who's got the annotation. He's been caught in the past of abusing a child. When I go to set him apart and put him in the system, does the system kick it back out? And
yes, you will not be allowed to enter his name into the system in the call.
Yeah. So and you don't know why, but sometimes the stake president I talked to said sometimes they'll be in the calling for a little bit before you go ahead and, update everything. And then they're told, oh gosh, he's not supposed to do that for some reason.
Yeah. And you remember Poetic Kate, who was on the show, Bill?
Yeah.
Who used to work there? Well, she talked, and this is in the article. I didn't include this part, but she talks about how she would get, when she worked for the church, and she would get calls from bishops saying, what's going on? I want this person to be my whatever. And your computer system is not letting me. So fix your computer system. And she would have to explain to them why. So there are situations, unfortunately, where either the bishop is going to say, okay, you can't have the calling, or, okay, I'm going to give you the calling and just not enter it into the system.
Yeah. You implied a few minutes ago that perhaps the local leadership at Wade Christofferson's ward just didn't notice the red flag. And I just want to point out, I know you were, I don't know what the right term is, but being maybe a little facetious. Yeah. And so I just want to note that when Wade would have been called to other callings, it wouldn't have allowed it to go through if that was the issue, that someone just happened to miss it. It seems quite apparent in that situation that if there ever was an annotation, and there sure as hell should have been, that somebody removed the annotation, and that could only have been done with first presidency approval.
Yeah. And the only thing I can say about that is we don't know when this feature was added to the system.
Yeah.
Okay. And it could have been after.
Well, I will say this. It existed when I was bishop.
Oh, yeah?
Again, I'm 47, and I was a bishop in my late 20s, early 30s. So
when was that?
Let's see, 78, 88, 98, 2008, 2007 to 2012.
Okay, so
I was the bishop, and there was an annotation system. I never saw it, but we had an instance where a foster father, stepfather, again, there's a story to explain that, but it was family who did the adoption. But the foster father, stepfather alleged to have molested these 2 girls. They were adults at this point, and there was conversation between me and the stake president about putting an annotation on his record, even though he had never been convicted of anything. Again, I don't know if it ever happened, and I never came across a record that did have an annotation. It was left as I was leaving that calling. It was left with the stake president saying he was going to handle it. But I was aware that annotations were a possibility in the system.
The feature to which I was referring was not being able to input their name in that calling. Did you encounter that too, Bill?
No, and it would be ridiculous if you required untrained local leaders to catch an annotation without the system automatically not allowing the calling to be completed.
Well, true. Anything you wanted to add, Rebecca, before I go on?
Oh, I was just kind of doing the math if what Bill said is correct about annotations. I know that Wade Christofferson was back in business being put in bishoprics in 2006. So had there been something on his record, either, online that would stop him from been put in the calling, or something they would see, somebody would have had to say, we're putting this guy in a bishopric. Oh, look, there's a red flag. Let's find out. Someone would have had to say that. That makes me think it was not there somehow.
The office of the first presidency was involved, I think, at least 3 times at 3 steps for Wade Christofferson, as they would be for anybody. All right, continuing on. If a lay bishop, they're all lay bishops in the Mormon Church, I guess, except for the presiding bishop. If a lay bishop somehow misses the icon and note, so they miss the red flag, the church's software for leaders will prevent him from selecting members. That's why I said that when you asked, Bill. Will prevent the leader from selecting members with an annotation if he attempts to input them for certain volunteer tasks. Certain volunteer tasks, such as youth leader, that is if he or his clerk, once again, I underlined this, that is if he or his clerk takes the time to input the assignment digitally in the first place. So there's all these places, all these cracks in the system for things to fall through. And when you're dealing with a lay leadership on the local level, I think those cracks just get wider. Another way the system is designed to protect children concerns the limitations put on leaders when determining the outcome of a disciplinary council. So the church puts limitations on leaders. In other words, it directs them to a specific conclusion if they find certain things. I know we decry that sometimes. We think that the church leaders put certain, in other words, it's apostasy if a person is like doing a certain kind of podcast. And so you need to be directed to have this kind of outcome. I can't say that that's happening there, though I think it is. And I think we pretty much demonstrated that on a number of occasions. What this article is saying is it's definitely the case when it comes to child abuse. Church policy states that councils cannot opt. They cannot choose this. In the case of those deemed guilty of abuse, to merely informally restrict the person's membership. A designation that could include, depending on what a leader decides, a prohibition on offering prayers and sermons or holding volunteer assignments. Informal restrictions are not noted on membership records. So you got informal restrictions, you've got formal restrictions, and you've got excommunication. Informal restrictions don't go on membership records, and therefore the church policy is that in the case of a finding of abuse, you cannot do informal restrictions. You have to do at least formal restrictions so it shows up on the records. Makes sense to me. In instances of abuse, the handbook and the church's software instead requires either formal membership restriction, barring the individual from volunteer assignments, or total membership removal. Both are noted on records. A third safety feature within the software is the ability to place a move restriction on individual membership records, a signal to future leaders to call the bishop who put it there for more information about the member. Now, of course, we decried this. I think I decried it when it came to Kate Kelly. You may remember that her bishop, I think it was Virginia, somewhere back east, had put a move restriction on her record. She had moved to Utah, and they held, if I'm remembering this correctly, they held the disciplinary council back in Virginia, and she didn't attend. She would have had to fly all the way back. She chose not to. So that was because of I think it was a move restriction. But of course, in a situation like this, I have a different feeling about it. A move restriction, because when a person moves and comes into another person's ward, got a move restriction on his record. Okay, that signals the bishop. It should also have the flag, I think, to call his former bishop to get more information about this guy. You know, bishops have so much to do. This is the problem. This is the problem. I'll just say my comment here before I get to the end. Bishops have so freaking much to do. These are guys who are generally working 40 hours a week, doing their regular jobs. And then they got to put in another 20 hours on top of it to be a bishop. Then they're supposed to spend time with their family. And there's too many things for one person to do as a part-time job when he has a full-time job already. And things fall through the cracks because of that. I think if they had full-time jobs and were paid for it, they might be more up to speed on this. I don't know. A former Utah bishop, one of the people that was interviewed, expressed his frustration with watching leaders wait on slow-moving courts to resolve a case before holding a disciplinary council and annotating a person's record after a member was charged with abuse of minors. Asked if he ever received formal training on the annotation process, he said, no. Former Utah bishop never received formal training on the annotation process. So that problem is higher than just the bishops. I think you get training on things the church cares that you have to get training about. Meanwhile, and someone had mentioned this earlier, meanwhile, the women who helm the organizations for women, teenage girls, and young children do not have independent access to view annotations and are generally not a part of disciplinary councils. Instead, they rely on their male counterparts to assess and inform them of possible risk to congregants for whom they have responsibility. I think that the children, and particularly the female children, would be better protected if the female leaders in the ward and stake knew about this stuff. Other potential pitfalls described by the former bishops of keeping congregants in the dark include a leader withholding information about an abuse case from church headquarters, believing the individual had repented and no longer represented a threat. So there was a bishop or a stake president who didn't tell the first presidency about a person who had abused some child, apparently, because that local leader believed the individual had repented and no longer represented a threat. These are ways that things fall through the cracks. Perhaps the leader is friends with the accused or confessor and fears tarnishing the person's reputation with membership removal. Or new information about an old case emerges and never gets entered into the system.
That second one you read is what happened in Wade Christofferson's case, because he was allegedly very good friends with stake leadership and they did not do anything, even though people were reporting alleged abuses. And it wasn't until there was a change in leadership that somebody really looked at it and said, this person needs to be disciplined. So it went on for a while because of friendship.
Christofferson must have been a celebrity in his ward and state.
Exactly.
His brother's an apostle, for crying out loud. Removing an annotation. Once again, we got the first presidency involved. When it comes to removing an annotation, the decision ultimately rests in the hands of the church's three most powerful men, the first presidency, who act on requests from bishops and stake presidents. So a bishop or stake president, usually a stake president, is going to request that an annotation be removed. Stake president can, but doesn't have to, make such a request on behalf of a member. An example, one provided by the stake president from the South, that was talked to for this article, involved an annotation that was the result of child sex abuse committed 4 decades before. Given the amount of time that had passed without any reports of a new offense, he said, I hope he did a real thorough investigation of that, he felt it was appropriate to expunge the man's record. He submitted a request to the office of the first presidency saying as much. Shortly afterward, the little red flag disappeared. He emphasized, however, that such removals are rare. Being rebaptized and having one's temple blessings and for men priesthood restored do not on their own expunge a person's annotation. All right? I mean, what are you thinking about this system so far, Bill?
I still don't clearly understand the church's process. Like, I don't understand how they like does the first presidency approve, or does somebody else on behalf of them? As I'm watching you share all of this, I'm seeing plenty of places where things can still go wrong. Again, untrained lay clergy that has no training at all. I never got any training. All the bishops or members of bishoprics, members of stake presidencies, I've talked to a handful of stake presidents. None of them seem to indicate that there's any high level of training that goes on. Training sometimes is just 2 hours sitting down and somebody going like, this is how you do this thing. I see a lot of room for things to go wrong. And because there is a system in place that should work, and even in those instances, at times annotations are being removed and then abuse occurs later, the system is still not functional. And lots of people are pointing to that.
It's like a great rocket, but instead of astronauts, you've got a bunch of, I don't know, couch potatoes manning the helm with no experience. The system it can be top notch, and I think this has a lot to recommend it. But if you don't train people and make sure that they know how to use it and that they are using it correctly, there must be monitoring. There must be quality assurance. That is, if the church thinks this is really that important. The last part on this slide was the church will let a member return and repent, he said, but the annotation usually remains. So you get excommunicated for something like this, you get rebaptized 10 years later, you come back, you get your priesthood restored, you get your temple blessings restored, but he says the annotation, he says usually remains. I hope that would be always remains. But
can I jump back in for just a second, RFM? Let me give it a counter example to something that actually functions really well in the church. The collection of tithing, getting it to the bank, and setting up tons of protocols that prevent embezzlement or people stealing, right? Like you had somebody from the stake would come in and do an audit once or twice a year, any little glitch out of place, any little thing. And somebody would sit down with you and give you tons of shame for you not following all the protocols. And don't you ever let that happen again. And would you sign here saying you'll never let that happen again? The fact that it has to be counted with 2 people, the fact that if there's cash or there's checks, here's how it's handled. When it comes to money, these guys know exactly how they want things to go because they want every penny to be collected. And if you embezzle, good, you get an annotation for that too. And good luck getting that one removed. They are serious about their money being taken. If the church could just do as good with the abuse of children that it does with ensuring that local leadership collects every penny and nobody steals anything, then we'd be better off if we just got that far.
That is a really good point. Rebecca, do you have anything you want to say? I'm almost done with the story.
I agree with Bill. On paper, this may look like, wow, this is an innovative system to protect, but the human error just negates any kind of benefit. There's just too much. There's just too many untrained people and people that have kind of ulterior motives or don't want to hurt somebody or their family and all of that. And I will say about the annotation remaining there, that is another thing then you request to have removed, you know, and I've heard 2 different conflicting reports on this. One leader, somebody in higher leadership, told me every single one of those goes past the first presidency and they look at it and say, yes, this annotation can be removed. That would be a lot, I think. Another person, I tend to believe this more, said stacks of these are relegated down to the desks of general authorities and they just kind of go through and do that. So I don't know what to believe. They're keeping us in the dark for some reason, but the fact that we report on this kind of thing every single week and we don't even report everything that we could because it's just too much, and these are people in leadership positions, shows that it's not working. whatever it is. They don't care about the children as much as they care about the money. I think Bill made that pretty clear.
Yes. Meanwhile, the church instructs leaders to give victims and alleged victims a chance to weigh in whenever possible when deciding whether to readmit members booted for abuse. I mean, it sounds idyllic, but I read this and I think of all the counterexamples I've heard of victims not being allowed to weigh in, of things happening without their knowledge or not happening at all. So I'm wondering how much of this is wishful thinking and how much of this is reality. One of the former bishops interviewed, who currently lives in Canada, recalled a man in his congregation who had tried to be readmitted and have his annotation removed after losing his membership for abusing his daughter. The stake president, he said, decided not to seek removal. So that's where it ended, because he's the gatekeeper on this. False confidence. One former bishop lamented what he saw as a lack of standardized training as a fundamental flaw to the annotation system and its ability to prevent abuse. So it sounds like we got another former bishop here, Bill Reel, who seconds that. Do leaders, all of them, know the process, he speculated? Probably not. Do they follow all the policies? Probably not. Case in point. Here we go with Wade. The Salt Lake Tribune spoke with several individuals who attended a congregation with Wade Christofferson in the 1990s. During this time, at least one person came forward and accused him of sexually abusing her a few years before, when she was in about 8th grade. Now, this is back in the 1990s that she's making this accusation that had happened back then, I believe. The leaders in their Chicago suburb, because he's in Illinois at the time, he will move to Ohio, but he's in Illinois right now. The leaders in their Chicago suburb withdrew Christofferson's membership. They excommunicated him, but never informed the congregation as to the reason. Within that vacuum of information, interviewees said a rumor spread, one absent allegations of threats to children. It was that he had committed adultery on his wife. Nothing about kids involved. That was the rumor. The reality was quite different. Wade Christofferson later moved to Ohio, where he served as a counselor in a bishopric for a young single adult congregation and several other callings as well. A former member of that unit said he was never informed of Christofferson's past. Last November, Wade Christofferson, the brother of a high-ranking apostle who's not named here for some reason, but there's his picture, and his name is D. Todd Christofferson. He's in the first presidency. Good call, Dallin. Last November, Wade Christofferson, the brother of a high-ranking apostle, was charged with attempting to sexually exploit a Utah child. But the idea, said one expert, that abuse can be contained through internal investigations by men using internally housed, often limited information shared in cryptic or incomplete ways, has already been tried by Catholics. These are steps in the right direction, Bartholomew said. She's one of the experts. But if they're not executed well, they're going to give them false confidence. And we have seen so much false confidence, bragging about how it's the freaking gold standard. False confidence that they're addressing a problem when they're not. I think that's the case here, and that's the end of the story. I'm going to give it back to you, Rebecca. Any thoughts from you?
My dog was snoring really loud, so I had to mute it. It wasn't me. No, just that we have done little segments on the annotation before as we try to kind of root this out. And I'm glad to see that some bishops and stake presidents are coming forward to talk about it in the public, right? In a news article. I think that's what needs to happen. That's the only way the system's going to get any better. And I agree with someone in the comments that said, really, the only way it's going to get better is members and parents stand up and say, this is unacceptable. We need to protect our congregation. We need to be made aware. There needs to be changes and a system. Until that happens, we can only do so much from the outside reaching in. People in those wards every day, people in the pews need to stand up and insist that there's something that protects kids, not the tithing money, but the kids.
Yeah, you should. If you're the LDS Church, you should protect the children at least as well as you protect the tithing money. And if at least by that standard, there's a ways to go.
All right. I think we'll move on to Bill's story is next, right? This was kind of a big deal. I think our next story is, this was another huge story from last week. A lot of national interest in this.
Yeah, I watched just last night. I was seeing him doing an interview with his wife by his side, and I was trying to figure out what was going on here. So, Mark Lamb, the former Pinal County sheriff and Trump-endorsed Republican candidate for Arizona's 5th congressional district, is facing allegations involving sexual impropriety, explicit messages, alleged affairs, claims of swinger activity, and alleged threats towards women who spoke publicly. Lamb and his wife have denied sexual impropriety and the swinging claims, and attorneys connected to Lamb's campaign have described many of the accusations as false, baseless, and politically motivated. I will also say there's quite a few voices out there who are pointing to there being a problem, who interacted with him. Not that the number of accusations makes something true. Not always where there's smoke is there fire, but there is smoke coming from lots of directions. But the allegations have already created political fallout, with some Arizona Republicans saying Lamb needs to explain himself or leave the race. Lamb and his wife, Janelle, are Latter-day Saints, and reporting from several news sources state that the LDS Church examined claims about Lamb's alleged sexual misconduct some time ago. One woman, Jillian Stenard, said that she contacted church leaders after claiming Lamb's behavior had damaged her marriage and involved others in a sexually inappropriate situation. According to the reporting, she believed church officials were going to take the matter seriously, but the question now is what, if anything, the church actually did with those allegations. Lamb has built much of his public image around faith, family, and traditional values, and these accusations run directly against the political and religious brand that Lamb has promoted. Again, active, faithful member, family-oriented, running sort of a purity, traditional value kind of campaign. So when a Mormon campaigns as a faith-led and defender of family values, then allegations of affairs, explicit photos, intimidation, and possible church inquiry become politically relevant, not merely gossip. I'll just note again, I think there's more to come out on this. I think this is still on the front end of this. And I've watched enough. I'm 47 years old. I've watched enough of these things over the course of my life to watch people on the front end, when these kinds of allegations are made, step in front of the camera, say they're innocent, say these are just baseless claims. I'm not saying in this instance, but in the majority of those instances, there's seems to be something to it. And I will be interested to see how this all turns out. Your guys' thoughts, again, this is a former law enforcement, currently running in politics, Trump's Republican choice here for his congressional district. And you have him giving off the image of an active Latter-day Saint, and yet I don't know if I say lots, but several women are speaking up and saying this guy is not who he has claimed to be. Any thoughts from you guys?
Yeah,
I agree with you that just a very small comment. I just agree with you that these allegations, these kind of allegations, they will happen with some regularity against different people who are in the limelight. And I agree with you. I cannot recall once when the person against whom the allegations were made said, well, I guess you got me.
Why would you say that when you can just get away with it? Yeah.
I did it all, and I do it again. They never say that.
That's called being forthright. I think you'd probably get some props for doing that. But no, there are so many screen grabs and things on this where there is fire, where there is this smoke. And I kind of pursued the angle when I was looking at it. Again, all this happened while I was on vacation. We were all on vacation. I made that joke about lots of news. This was one of the bigger stories that we didn't cover right when it came out. But the question was, why do these church leaders seem to be ignoring all of this when these women in their stakes and wards are coming forward with evidence, evidence, screenshots of text messages, all these kinds of things that seem pretty damning, right?
Well,
So I
are
looked
these
into
women then? These women must be, at least they're Mormons, right?
yeah,
Why would they be
everybody's a
going to
Mormon.
church leaders otherwise
Yeah.
and not going to the police?
Yeah,
But there's
things like
images.
he's having an affair with my husband's having an affair with his wife, and he's encouraging it, things like that, right? I wondered if it was, something like happens here in Utah every once in a while, little pockets of swinging. I wondered if some people were all in on it, others weren't, and they were finding out and getting upset. I don't know. But the point is, leadership didn't really seem to take any of these seriously, didn't do anything. I wondered if perhaps he was sort of a higher up person in the church. No, but I think that politically he was on the rise. And I wonder if they were sort of, reticent to do anything to somebody that had the favor of certain political leaders. So I don't know, but I agree with you, Bill. There's more to come out. But if you want to go back and look through the different screenshots and the text messages, there's a lot there. But he can just smile at the camera and go, yep, no, I'm good.
And I'll just say, maybe strangely, I've never seen a photo quite like this, but you've got him on the far right in that picture. You would think that's his wife standing next to him.
Yeah.
His wife is the next lady over.
Yeah.
Even just the photo alone there is sort of strange. Like, my wife would stand next to me and your wife would stand next to you. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
There are images alleged to be things that he sent from his phone to some of the people claiming to be victims. There are text message images, and the text messages don't quite look like they're on the up and up. So I can just about assure you that there's a follow-up story here to be done on the Mormon Newscast. So with that, that's all I've got on this story.
Yep, crazy news. Let's see. Oh, look, it's one of my stories here. Of course, is a Fairview Temple update. We did this last week where we talked about how now mayor, then councilman John Hubbard had received an invitation. He actually provided me with a copy of this invitation. It's a save the date for the LDS Temple open house. Somebody in church leadership gave it to him, and he's so excited about that. That gave him the confidence as we went through last week. And again, you can freeze on this and read this letter. I read it in its entirety last week, to write another plea to the First Presidency, the Q15. He sent it to all of their emails, have no idea how he got them, and also hard copy, and to the Temple Department, and simply saying, look, it's over. The legality of everything is over. What about mercy? Could you lower that steeple 40 feet, 20 feet? That's all. What about now an act of goodwill? We're looking at Yorba Linda, where you did lower it from 90 feet to 70 feet and said you wanted to be a good neighbor. We're looking at Vienna, Austria, that just drawings were released last month and there's no steeple. Just thought he'd check in with new leadership and see if possibly, from the goodness of their hearts, they could simply lower that steeple. No other changes, nothing else. Just lower that steeple. And so it's a very eloquent letter. It's a great letter. I read it last time. Again, you guys can freeze on this and read it. Well, I did not think he would ever hear anything. Nobody ever writes a letter back, right? And as Mayor John has said over and over, the only people we've ever talked to in this whole Fairview Temple building process were the lawyers. We have begged to talk to somebody else. Mayor Henry Lessner, the mayor during the process, said, I will fly to Salt Lake and meet with anyone who's a decision maker, who can talk to me. Nobody would talk to him. Well, I was shocked. An actual letter arrived from somebody higher up in the LDS Church than Mayor Hubbard or anybody in the town had ever talked to. So I was very surprised, and I was very curious to see what this letter said. So I'm going to read it. I'll read pretty quickly, but it's addressed, the letter, it does have letterhead, unlike my co-host Landon's temple excommunication letter, or, membership excommunication letter. So I think this is legit. It has the right kind of letterhead. The church's name is spelled right. It's from the Temple Department, the Executive Director, Elder Stephen R. Bangeter. So he starts out, Dear Mayor Hubbard, right? Thank you for your letter to senior church leaders regarding the Fairview Temple. As the Executive Director of the church's Temple Department, I have been asked to respond. So none of the Q15 will respond, even though that's who he addressed the letter to. The Executive Director of the Temple Department will respond. Before addressing the letter, meaning the letter that Mayor John had sent, I want you to know that I firmly believe the Fairview Temple will become a beautiful and peaceful addition to Fairview. Okay, that's great. I'm glad that you firmly believe that. We look forward to welcoming everyone to the open house and inviting all citizens to enjoy the temple grounds. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I hope you will join us and feel the love of the Lord for all his children. Your letter acknowledges that the church has the right to build the temple as approved by the town council, but requests that we nevertheless reopen the approval process and agree to a smaller temple with a shorter steeple. This is not what Mayor John said in his original letter. Nowhere did he say, change the square footage, make it a smaller temple. Nowhere did he say we will have to open up the approval process. That is not necessary. The temple is approved for up to 120 feet. That means with mercy and out of the goodness of their heart, the LDS Church could lower it to any amount without anything having to go back through the council. And nowhere did the mayor request, please change the footprint, please change the specifications. He's just talking about the steeple. So here the temple department has reframed the question and answered it when it wasn't even what the mayor was asking. I feel like I've heard that technique before. The temple is currently under construction, stopping construction to begin a whole new design, not what the mayor asked, an approval process, not necessary, would be extremely costly and cause much delay. Further square footage reductions, again, the mayor did not request that, are also not possible due to the worship needs of our members. And here's where we get into, the burgeoning membership. They've got to have a massive building. There are so many members, like they're climbing out of the woodwork, out of the rafters. The church is unable to agree to this proposal. Okay, great, because that's not what the mayor asked. He simply said, instead of going up to 120 feet, why don't you make it 100? Or why don't you make it, 90? As you know, in a good faith effort to reasonably compromise, the church has already made very significant concessions. Again, the applicant does not make concessions, but the church, backed by billions and teams of lawyers, think they do. We have substantially lowered the steeple and reduced the temple size by almost a third. This is true. This happened due to public outcry. The town agreed to the new design in mediation, and it was later approved by a supermajority vote of the town council. Not true. It did not have a supermajority, and that led to some litigation or some questions later from some of the residents and how voting that would have needed a supermajority would have happened. So it's so confusing that the executive director of the temple department would get so many details about Fairview incorrect. He, of anybody, should know, I feel like.
And all the mayor's asking is, hey, would you do me a solid and lower the freaking temple a little?
Mercy. We can't fight you legally. We can't fight you monetarily. We can't fight our lupa. What you're using as a sword to hammer the town, our religious freedom. Just do it. And he even said in his original letter, it's a time where maybe you could use some good PR. There are some things out there that aren't necessarily positive.
Rebecca,
yes.
When you first broke the story about the letter that the mayor had written to the church, what did I say the response would be?
I think you said this pretty much.
Yeah, they were going to say pound sand.
I wish there was a response. I know. Almost finished here. The court further affirmed the process and outcome by rejecting the lawsuit of neighbors who sought the same concessions you now seek. Not true at all. That had nothing to do with it. The neighbors were simply saying, I think it needs a supermajority. And then there was a bunch of legal maneuvering around that. So again, so many details not correct. We asked the town to honor its commitments and support the approved design. And here's where we get into, I sense that it's kind of a veiled affirmation of the steeple doctrine. Religious architecture is an expression of faith and hope in God. Each house of worship conveys its own unique message within the larger context of the faith. The nature of the steeple's reach toward heaven, and indeed whether a steeple should exist at all, is not for municipal authorities to decide, as if the edifice were little more than an office building. Yes, it is for municipal authorities to decide, who have zoning and codes voted on by their citizens and town councils. You're saying it's not for them to decide because you are armed with billions of dollars, teams of lawyers, and our lupa using it as a sword. But in a normal circumstance, a town does get to decide what is built based on its codes and zoning. Compelling reasons can sometimes justify limits, maybe like Yorba Linda, where their codes are so solid they could never win that fight. But a desire not to see a steeple is not a compelling reason. Again, putting words in someone's mouth. That is not what anyone said. They welcome the temple. They welcome the steeple. Please make it fit into the nature of our town.
Yeah. Can you make it shorter? Does it mean get rid of it altogether?
No, they just jumped to that outrageous conclusion. Ugh.
It's
And
a
as
straw
you
man.
are aware,
The whole letter is a straw man letter.
exactly. And as you are aware, towering steeples of many denominations dot the landscape of rural towns throughout America. Okay.
Jeez.
Towering steeples like the temple do not exist everywhere. And steeples jacked to Jesus with lighting do not exist everywhere. They're ignoring the elephant in the room of the extreme lighting. Then he says the temple's modest steeple. I feel like that's an oxymoron. The modest steeple will only complement Fairview's character. Thank you for telling us what will complement Fairview. And the final line, we remain confident that in time, the Fairview Temple will be recognized as a welcome and uplifting presence in the community. So interesting, huh? I thought that was fascinating. And Mayor John did write a response letter. And I'm not going to have time to go through it here. I will make some posts on social media with it, and you can freeze when I get to it.
Hey, but Rebecca, I'm not going to go over my story. I'm going to X my story because I want to hear Mayor John's response.
All right, if you want to. But here's the thing that happened that really just shocked the pants off me. I'm not kidding. So I did a pop-up podcast with Mayor John himself. It aired this morning. Anybody can go on Mormonish and watch it. And in the process of talking about everything that had happened, he went back to prior to mediation in September of 2024. And I wasn't talking to Mayor John so much then. I was dealing with Henry Lessner. Remember wonderful Mayor Henry Lessner? So I had not heard this story before, but apparently, and Mayor John was a council member at the time, right? So in preparation for this mediation, some of the LDS leaders had suggested that he go take a look at the Dallas temple. It's only half an hour away from where the Fairview temple is going to be built. And they said, if you go over there and look at that temple, you'll see what we're all about. You know, you'll see the blessing that it is. You'll see the grounds. You know how they say all the time, you are going to be welcome to enjoy the grounds. The grounds will bless your community. The grounds, they can't stop talking about the grounds. So Mayor John, just 2 days ago, told me this story. He goes, I went over to the grounds. And then he said, I was asked to leave. Okay, I had to find out what that was all about. So I asked him to kind of give me a statement today that I put out on social media. So what basically happened is he drove his car over there. He circled the building and he was taking pictures and filming with his camera, because what would you look at if you were about to head into mediation about a temple coming to your town? You would look at, is there parking? Are there cars? How many people are here during the day? You know, what's the gate? How about security? What is the, you would be filming, you would be getting information for the mediation. This is what he was doing. So then he said, the person who removed me never identified that he was security, just someone from the church. I drove around the parking lot. I got out of the car and walked onto the grounds. I was recording while I was driving around, but I put my phone in my pocket while I walked on the grounds. I did not take any pictures when I got out of the car because I did not want to disturb anyone. Mayor John is just a fantastic, respectful person. He has a PhD. He's a faculty teacher at a university. I mean, he's an awesome person, and he's walking over to the temple to go on the grounds, just like he's been encouraged to do by the LDS leaders. So then he says, the man approached me and asked why I was there. I told him that it was suggested that I look at the temple grounds in Dallas because a temple is planned for Fairview. I was then asked to leave. I was told, we are having family gatherings now. Please leave. I told the LDS people later at the mediation what had happened, and they apologized, and they said that shouldn't have happened. I have a feeling that that happens more than it doesn't happen. What do you guys think about that revelation? I mean, he said, there may be a reason that they just asked me to leave. He goes, I don't want to go there. I don't want to play that card, but it's possibly, a racial issue. What are your guys' thoughts on this? I couldn't believe it. I wish that I would have known this story 2 years ago. Boy, can you imagine what we would have done with this? But yeah.
Well, racial or not, he certainly could have thrown it in the teeth of the representatives of the church that were saying that one of the benefits of the Fairview Temple to the community would be that non-members would be able to stroll around the temple grounds.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I think it's funny that the mediators just said, the leaders said, yeah, I'm sorry that happened. But anyway, it's going to bless you all. You're going to be allowed on the grounds. And Mayor John's going, will we? Bill, any thoughts on that really quick?
To have the temple, the church says it's such a gift to have it in your community. There's so many blessings that come to you. And yet, as an outsider, everything about the temple is exclusion. Oh, you get to go to the visitor center. Oh, you can hang out on the grounds, maybe. But everything about that is an exclusionary thing. And I don't know. When we were believers, we made excuses for it. I remember telling people the story of like only the Levites could study the ark. And so God has it sometimes where only certain segments of his people are allowed to perform certain rituals or to do certain tasks. But now I'm on the other side and I'm far removed from it. And I just see so much exclusion to the extent that you just cause damage in families, especially if they're part member families.
Yeah.
Just 5 or 6 years ago that Elder Stevenson got up at the NAACP meeting and had to apologize for the inclusion of a really racist quote from Joseph Fielding Smith about the skin of blackness in the Book of Mormon. And the reaction, and what he said was, that was an oversight that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think that what church members mean when they say that wasn't supposed to happen is, oops, I shouldn't have said that. This is the way we operate, but we are not supposed to see it. We're not supposed to do it that overtly.
Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know. I can think of a lot of people that would not be welcome on the grounds, just superficially. Like could a same-sex couple walk through the grounds of the temple site holding hands, just walking through? I don't know. And I don't know if there's some like kind of self-policing just by members that look around. I know there is security, but the idea that they just keep promoting the grounds because that's all they can promote, I don't necessarily think that's the draw that they think it is. So I'm not going to read the whole letter here. You guys can freeze on this and read it. He basically goes through correcting some of those points of the letter from the temple department. But I will read this last couple paragraphs. He says, and he has sent this, but not received a response. And in this case, I don't believe he will receive a response from this. A reduction to 100 feet would still produce a steeple taller than Yorba Linda's and the design that the church is already celebrating. It would not compromise worship. It would not require reopening the CUP. It would simply be a voluntary act of goodwill toward a community that has worked hard to be fair and respectful partner throughout this process. The church has shown through its own recent design choices that this flexibility exists. I am asking the church to extend the same thoughtfulness to Fairview. I also ask the church to consider the question of meaning. As people of all faiths pass through Fairview in the years ahead, what will this steeple say to them? Will it speak of a church that honored its values by being a generous and conscientious neighbor, one that chose goodwill over legal advantage? Or will it stand as a monument to a process in which a well-resourced institution used a procedural opening to impose its will upon a small town that lacked the means to resist? The church teaches that symbols matter. This steeple will be one. The question is what it will symbolize. I remain hopeful and I remain grateful for the relationship we have built. So,
that was
like I
very
said,
good.
Yeah, he's very eloquent. He just says it so well. He's just an awesome person. And my last little slide here was just Yorba Linda. In the news, they said, we just want to be a good neighbor, so we reduced the steeple. Not true. I believe that their codes were really locked down tight and they had to do it. And, so we'll see what happens.
They weren't being a good neighbor. The church is not a good neighbor. If there's one thing we can all see from this entire thing from beginning to end, the church is not a good neighbor. It is a legalistic organization, and you may as well, whistle past the graveyard as ask for mercy from a completely legalistic organization. There is no help for the widow's son.
That is a mic drop moment. So, all right. I think our next story is Bill's. And I do feel, since we're going short on time, that along with you, RFM, I will skip my next longer story and we'll just let Bill do his 2 smaller ones. And then I think we'll come out just right and we'll revisit it next time. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Let's do it, because I want to cover mine in depth. It's good. And yours is too. So let's let Bill take the next 2.
Well, I don't think this is some crucial thing to go into. I think your guys's was maybe more important, but I'll go. They're short.
I've actually had a lot of people say, "Are you guys going to cover that fifth Sunday?"
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people that have messaged me. They are very curious about this. So I think that there is something to this story.
Yeah, I watched this thing with what was it, D. Todd and Quentin Cook, and they were both talking about some very basic elements of constitutional law and American history, and then asked everybody to sort of talk about it amongst themselves in their meetings in their various wards.
Yeah.
Side tangent. I'm just looking at the photo there of Oaks on the right, and I just want to note something. If you ever look at this, is by the way, this is how you know the LDS Church is into appearances and public facing stuff rather than being honest and vulnerable. But when you look up any leader in the church, all the prophets back, Nelson, Monson, Hinckley, Benson, when they are in their final years and they look decrepit, if I can just be honest, you don't get those kinds of pictures ever showing up as the official photo of the leaders. They always back those photos up about a decade. And I'm looking at Oaks there, and he just looks old, and you'll never see him that old in the official singular photo of the leader when they put those out. I'll just note here, the LDS Church held a special Fifth Sunday lesson across the United States this week, and it focused on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the role of the Constitution played in protecting religious freedom. By the way, if you're not hearing it in that sentence, the whole center point, the crux of the chiastic structure on this Fifth Sunday lesson is religious freedom. Church leaders taught that the founding of the United States helped create conditions necessary for the founding of Mormonism. Remember that when we were younger and in the church, pointing members to long-standing LDS beliefs that God inspired the Constitution, inspired Christopher Columbus, inspired the founders of this country, and the freedom that the Constitution protects. The lesson featured a video message from President D. Todd Christofferson, Elder Quentin Cook, and it encouraged discussion about agency, moral agency, that is, folks. Don't get too excited. Religious liberty and the connection between America's founding and the rise of the church. The lesson has also sparked discussion among some Latter-day Saints who question whether emphasizing America's divine role can blur the line between faith and patriotism, especially in a global church where most members now live outside the United States. By the way, the Salt Lake Tribune published this article, and they're pointing out a criticism of this Fifth Sunday, which I'm trying to draw attention to in that first sentence of the second paragraph. I'll just note here, supporters see the lesson as a reaffirmation of teachings that have existed since Joseph Smith's day, while others worrying that tying the restoration too closely to American exceptionalism can overlook the more complicated realities of history. And the thing that they're pointing out is Mormonism has this story about how all the people, the characters, and the events that led up to the founding of this country were done by God solely for the purpose of the restoration of the Mormon church. That the church being founded is the whole purpose for all of these things happening. And when you have a one-sided message like that, that ignores the varying religious views of the founders, that ignores all of the atrocities that Christopher Columbus did, that ignores all the other benefits that a free country was designed to be good for. And when you make it all about Mormonism, you are painting a picture that's just not historically accurate. But hey, who's going to blame Mormonism for telling an inaccurate historical story? They sure aren't. Either way, I'll just note here that either way, the lesson represents the church once again leaning into a core Mormon belief that the Constitution, religious freedom, and the restoration are all deeply connected because Mormonism says so. And when one studies American history in its own historical context and sees the variation in the lives of those who enacted the founding of this country, so little of it has anything to do with Mormonism, and the story Mormonism tells isn't isn't extremely accurate. And so people were in the Salt Lake Tribune. Tamara Kemsley was making the point that people were pointing out that this is an old narrative that Mormonism still uses, that maybe it needs to change along with all the other changes that it's made. Any thoughts from you guys? I remember all those patriotic Mormon stories about the founding of the country. And, when we learned that Wilford Woodruff got a revelation to baptize and do ordinances for all the founders. And then
they appeared, Bill. They all appeared to him.
Oh, they appeared.
Yeah. And then we find out, I remember in one of your early episodes, RFM, and you and I had a conversation. We find out, I think it starts with Rock Waterman pointing out that, those guys had already had their ordinances done long before Wilford Woodruff proclaimed to have that revelation. And then I thought to myself, like, why would they need to visit him and get their ordinance done?
Because the foot came out of the water, Bill.
Something like that, huh?
The toe pierced the surface at the critical moment. By the way, is it just me, or is this really a picture of President Oaks? Because he kind of looks like that famous meme guy who's sort of standing behind the tree saying, "I got to watch me some more Radio Free Mormon."
he needs more sunlight. I can tell you that much.
I think what he's saying is, I've got to abridge some more people's religious freedom.
His skin matches the background color of the
oh my gosh,
of the what is that, the Constitution? Yeah.
Yeah, it could fit on his head at this point.
Oh gosh, I also remember these stories, Bill, as I'm sure you do, RFM. I was raised by Bircher Benson Skousenite parents, so my stories were George Washington. You know why he was so successful? You know who was in his tent? Moroni.
And you know what Moroni was doing in his tent?
Yeah.
We'll get the kids out of the room.
Yeah. Oh, well,
I'll tell you.
There is that story. But yeah, and the story that any freaking thing in history that happened had to do with Mormonism. And I had done a podcast about that. There's a story, I think Tim Ballard tells us or wrote a book on it, about the Mayflower and a kid that fell overboard and was hauled back in, and his descendants, were in Joseph's family. Well, also his descendants, I found out, were in the founder of the Seventh-day Adventists. So how do we know it wasn't all for the Seventh-day Adventists? We don't know. But this is the secret sauce of Mormonism. This is patriotism. That is how everybody has the picture of Washington kneeling beside his horse in the stake centers and their houses. And I'm sorry, the founding fathers were Christian deists. If you want to know about this, here, look, I have a book. You got to read Matt Harris's book, The Founding Fathers and the Debate Over Religion in Revolutionary America. This is our book club meeting. I'm doing a plug on the 14th of June, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Text me for the Zoom link. Matt Harris is going to join us. He talks about this all the time. So it's not going to end. But I think with the global church, more members outside the U.S. than in, what are they doing? How is that appealing? How does that resonate at all? Don't they need to change that?
There's a little bit of a victory lap going on here.
Maybe.
Which shouldn't be. I mean, when you're the leaders of a worldwide church, you should be saying, but still, we're kind of better than everybody else.
Isn't the whole crux of religious freedom is I am free to break the rules that other people can't break about prejudice or exclusion. I'm allowed to do those things because I'm a religion. It's sort of, you're fighting for the ability. Otherwise, you just have the same rights everybody else has. Religious freedom seems to be the ability to do the things that no one else is allowed to do in the name of religion.
No, and they make sure they have seminars for LDS members. They go around to stake centers. They have people that give religious, know your religious rights. A lot of these happen in temple building towns because those members need to know what they are owed, what they can get, what's rightfully theirs when it comes
to train the members pretty good on that, don't they?
Yes, exactly. And they do. They have seminars, they have meetings, all kinds of things. They have like traveling seminars about religious freedom. And I just think they want all of them to be rabidly protective of their religious freedoms. Heaven forbid, right?
I'm not going to believe the church is serious about protecting religious freedom until it's actively pushing for the reinstatement of polygamy.
Yeah.
There you go. Maybe that's what it's all about.
All right, I'll knock out this last story and then we can go home after we talk about the things we've been creating for this week's content. But this is some good news. And I want to give the church kudos for doing a piece of good here. The LDS Church has officially opened its new humanitarian center in Salt Lake City. replacing the facility that's been operating in various forms for more than 3 decades. Church leaders are presenting the center as more than a warehouse for humanitarian aid. The new facility combines global relief efforts with job training, English language instruction, employment counseling, and self-reliance programs and with a focus on immigrants, refugees, and others facing barriers to employment. Church leaders say the goal is not to just provide assistance, but to help people develop skills that lead to long-term stability and independence. One of the more interesting aspects of the center is that many of the people sorting and processing and preparing humanitarian supplies are themselves immigrants and refugees. I just saw one of the articles this morning was talking about how a high number of Muslim refugees are being given opportunities to work here and to learn skills here. And so kudos to the church for the good that it's doing in that. Associates are paid while they learn English. And by the way, this isn't the missionaries teaching English kind of thing. This has got no proselytizing going on. And this is just supposed to be, at least what the articles pointed to, is a genuine effort to teach them English, not the sleight of hand of teaching English being used to get a baptism, which happens all over the world, by the way. So associates are paid while they learn English. They receive job training. They earn certifications and prepare for future employment opportunities. Now, donations from Deseret Industries are sorted and processed at the center. We expect as much, with usable goods being distributed for humanitarian relief around the world. Church officials highlighted statistics showing thousands of job placements and millions of pounds of recycled and donated materials moving through the welfare and humanitarian system each year. What they haven't highlighted, though, is where the profit from Deseret Industries and its subsidiaries that deal with the humanitarian effort, who gets that money at the very top. That is not allowed for any of us to see, because DI and other parts of the humanitarian effort of the church are a subsidiary of the church, and hence they get to hide their numbers just like the church does. So I'm curious about that, but they are doing some good there. So the opening also appears to be part of the church's ongoing effort to increase its humanitarian work and public services initiatives. By the way, they've got tons of money. It grows by billions and billions each year. I think they're up to over 300, maybe $350 billion in total money in its investment portfolio, as well as assets that it owns, such as land and companies. And, glad they're doing it. They have the means to, but they are increasing their humanitarian aid as well, as that number goes through the sky, as that money that they've got. So I'll just note here, let's see here. Public service initiative is a way to show its effort to spend more of the money that it's hoarded. The first presidency toured the facility prior to its dedication. We saw pictures of that a few weeks ago, and the church has opened the center to public tours through much of the summer. Visitors can learn about the church's worldwide aid programs and even participate in hands-on service projects. So if you go do a tour through the facility, they let you help contribute to the volunteer hours at doing all of the free work that goes on there, along with the paid work, of course. Whether viewed as a humanitarian effort or a public-facing showcase of the church's charitable work, the new center represents a significant investment in both local community support and the church's global relief operations. Now, here's the kicker. This was interesting. According to KSL, the facility includes a dedicated devotional room specifically designed to accommodate Muslim associates who perform daily prayers. Humanitarian Center Manager Troy Casper said many of the Muslim workers were deeply moved when they saw the space and viewed it as a sacred place. So I want to say, again, kudos to the church for acknowledging that other faiths have spiritual rituals and needs that should be accommodated, and that the church, in its effort to reach primarily at least one facet of its outreach in this humanitarian center, is to reach Muslim refugees. And so they created a space for those Muslim workers to be able to uphold their prayer rituals during the course of the workday. There's also been reports of foot washing stalls. And I thought maybe this was a the economic version of the second anointing. That's not the case. If you were wondering if this is the discounted second anointing, you'd be mistaken. However, the prayer room was designed to accommodate practicing Muslims, and so it would not be surprising if the facility included, I might pronounce this wrong, but wudu, ritual washing in the Muslim faith. And so to have those kinds of accommodations nearby, since observant Muslims typically perform ritual washing before prayer. The church intentionally built dedicated prayer space for non-LDS Muslim employees and is publicly emphasizing that the humanitarian center does not proselytize participants. And so again, for the good that's done there, kudos to the church. I'd like to know how much money they make from the donated goods that get sold at their DI and other humanitarian efforts that they make, but that's not something any of us get to know. So anyway, mix of good, I think, primarily. And I would say the bad is that the church has hoarded a lot of money, and yes, it spends more, but it hoards more than it spends. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Jesus comes back and we can buy a new mall or something. But anyway, your thoughts on this new humanitarian center, and then we can get out of here.
Well, I will tell you. I was waiting for you, Rebecca.
I was waiting for you, RFM.
So anyway, something that I found out earlier today, I don't know that it's breaking news, but it's certainly something that should be reported on and perhaps lauded, that the church is maybe for the first time or one of the first times in Gilbert, Arizona, opening a church building for homeless people to escape the heat and provide for some meals and places to wash clothes, is my understanding. So that's going down there in, I think it is the Williams Field Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So that may mean it's a stake center, but it is at 14439 East Pecos Road for all of our homeless listeners down there in Gilbert, Arizona. That's where it's going to be. It'll be, I think, escape the heat from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's Monday through Friday, so weekends you're on your own. But on weekdays, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at this building. And I think that's going to go, I don't know how long it's going to go. One would hope for the entire summer. But it looks like they're actually doing something positive for the community, regardless of religious affiliation.
I think that's amazing, because we've all seen here in my area in Davis County up here, people fighting against warming centers, when it was so cold and there were cold alerts, and the church would say, we'll give supplies, but we will not open our buildings. So I think they're just becoming more and more aware that people are watching them, and how can they not help in this way with all of their resources and buildings. So my thoughts on the humanitarian center, I still don't believe there's not proselyting. I maybe not formally, but I still believe there's going to be something. And I do question how, very right-wing members of the church would feel about this, in an era where
the Muslim bit.
Yeah. Or supporting immigrants. You know what I mean? I mean, you have Christ saying, of course, support immigrants, but then you have people that espouse other beliefs that perhaps are not so supportive.
Where does Christ say support immigrants?
I made that up. He said support everybody, Hey, if they can make it up in the scriptures, things that he said, I can make it up too and use it against anybody I want.
It's in the Bible. Where in the Bible? It's in the back there somewhere.
It's just in there. I can say anything. Nobody reads the scriptures. Anyway, thank you, Bill, for reporting on that. Let's close out with a couple things that are coming up for all of us during this next week. Like I mentioned, I did a pop-up podcast this morning on Mormonish. So this is already aired as a premiere, and it's out there. It's only about an hour long. And this is Landon and myself sitting down with Mayor John to go over the letter. It's where I first learned about him being, told to leave the grounds of Dallas. So about halfway through, you'll see my jaw drop the floor and just shake my head like, I can't believe I'm hearing that. And then you'll see me diabolically going, what am I going to do with this information? So it's a good podcast. Then on our regular Tuesday night slot, tomorrow night, 6 p.m., we are back to the word print studies that our wonderful guest Patrick brings on. And we're going to talk about soul author theory. This is also a response to the original podcast he did with us, a lot more information. And he's going to be presenting this at Sunstone. It's going to be pretty exciting, his work. So if you want a little preview, this is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. What do you guys
have? Is he basically debunking the apologists saying that word print studies show that there are multiple authors of the Book of Mormon?
Well, what he's debunking is they're saying there are so many authors, right? All these prophets. No, he's showing there's maybe like one or two. Joseph might have had some help, right? But there's certainly not as many as Book of Mormon authors would be necessary to have all the prophets having written something. So it's pretty innovative stuff. And like I said, sometimes you'll see me in this podcast kind of zoning out because I'm like, okay, I trust you. But it's really good. Yeah, put your thinking caps on for this one. All right. Next up for Mormon discussions. What do you guys have going on?
Well, that is somewhat of a question, but I think we're zeroing in on something, aren't we, Bill? Do we have a...
Oh, hey. Sorry, I switched it. We switched it at the same time.
Now we got 3 people who are clicking this.
Okay, I'm hands off. Hands
this
up.
will not end well. I know.
Somebody else do it. Hands up.
We're going to be talking about all the people who are leaving the church, and we are going to take a well-deserved victory lap. We have been calling out this lie that the church has been telling for at least 16 years now. Remember, ever since, who was the church historian? It was Marlin Jensen, right? Ever since in 2010, I think it was, that he let it slip when he publicly stated that the church is losing more members than it ever has in its entire history since 1837, in the days of Kirtland, as he put it. Ever since he let slip that, the church has been making all of these moves in order, moves that signal to me, and that we called out every step of the way at every one of these moves. We called out, this is signaling that the church is shrinking. All of these show that the church was shrinking. And we're going to go through all of those. But finally now, Jeff Strong has come out with his book, Torn, where he's finally, I shouldn't say he's finally, where we finally have a faithful member of the church who knows what he's doing, what he's talking about, did an extensive survey on it, which I happen to have taken, by the way. I just found this out last Saturday. I took it 3 years ago. And we'll talk about that as well. We'll even play some of it because I recorded it as an earlier RFM podcast. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Now, we do not have Jeff Strong coming on the show. Okay, I've talked to him. Bill's talked to him. Not going to be here. Wouldn't be prudent. But we're going to talk about it because right now this is really, really super, super important stuff. And like I say, we're going to take a victory lap because we've been calling it every step of the way, and the church has been calling us liars by saying, no, the church is growing faster than it's ever been growing in the history of the church. And now we find this out. Well, in your face, church, and all the people who lied to me about the church growing. And I'm looking at you, Elder Cook, especially you. So that's going to be Wednesday.
That should be fun. I hope that'll be exciting.
Do you think that Jeff will ever come on your podcast?
Possibly.
I think it's interesting that his book is all about post-Mormons, and so many of us would love to talk to him in front of a post-Mormon audience, and we haven't really had that opportunity yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Further your affiant saith not.
Exactly.
I can't tell you everything that we talked about in our conversation, but what I do tell you will be true.
There it is.
All right. So the following day, Thursday morning, we will be skipping the release of the latest episode in A Logical Deconstruction of Mormonism. Instead, I've got an interview releasing where I talked to Madison Daniels. I thought he was really intelligent and articulate. He was modeling, there's a series, Letters to a Young, and then whatever it is. And if we remember, I'm thinking is it Adam Miller that wrote Letters to a Young Mormon?
Yeah.
And he's modeling it after the series of people who have done Letters to a Young, and then you fill in the blank. But he's also reflecting on Miller's Letters to a Young Mormon. And so Madison Daniels wrote the book Letters to a Young Ex-Mormon, a field guide for moving on. We have a conversation for about an hour and a half, and I thought it was really, really good. This will release Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So please tune in for that.
Then we're going to have Mormonism After Dark on Friday. I know who's not going to be a co-host. I know who may be a co-host, or maybe there will be no co-host, but we're going to have a lot of fun anyway, just like we always do every Friday when we hang out with people that we know who've gone through the battles that we've gone through and have a lot of the same wounds that we have. It's like that scene out of Jaws when they're comparing scars at the table. Quint and Hoopa. So we have a good time, lots of laughs, and people get to, mainly the listeners drive the show. Though I talk about things for the first 20 minutes or half an hour in order to hopefully, set the table and give us something, some kind of direction, which usually never gets followed. And we just have a great time.
Is that it? Does that cover everything? Oh, no, not all, huh?
Yes, this is huge. It's huge. This was the last RFM. Bill was there. Colby Reddish was there. I was there. Randy Bell was there. And this is, it was just very, very exciting. This deep dive into the accounts of Moroni's visit to Joseph Smith. That's specifically what it is. There's a lot to talk about. It's, was it 3.5 hours? I think it was 3.5 hours. And there are some really significant and perhaps new insights that were obtained through this. Some of them even occurring as the show was live. So things I did not know and things that maybe Bill didn't know. I'll let him speak to that. But really, really interesting when you can get into the church history and look at the documents and compare some things and start asking some questions about why doesn't this match up with that?
I thought this was great. I think to get people together who are deeply informed about church history and to approach a topic from a new angle, talking about things that maybe haven't been discussed before, it's amazing the kinds of insights and connections that a group of informed people will make during that. And it happened a half dozen to a dozen times during this conversation.
I just had a great time, and I was very, very proud of the result. And I attribute it primarily to the guests who were on the show to help talk about these things.
Yeah, I saw that thumbnail and I was like, that looks amazing. You can never talk too much about Moroni.
Do you know what it's referencing?
What? No, I don't.
Okay, you see Judd Nelson there next to Moroni?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what that's from?
The Breakfast
It was a
Club?
movie. Yes. Yes, that's the final scene.
I didn't recognize that was him. Yeah.
What is the song that's playing when he freezes that frame as he's going across the field?
Oh gosh.
Don't you?
That's right. Forget about me. Oh, wow, that is an obscure. I wonder how.
I thought it was very obvious.
I thought
that was one of my more obvious preferences.
No, it is good. It's good. I like it. All right. A lot to watch. This is very exciting. And I think as far as the newscast, we came, we saw, we conquered. I think we did a good job catching up for the 2 weeks that we were on hiatus. And now we're back in the swing. We will be back, won't we? Next Monday, which I think will be the 8th, I'm guessing. And we'll have even more news and also revisit some of the stories we weren't able to cover because that dang Lego story took forever.
Oh, I won't be here next Wednesday, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know. Next Wednesday?
No, I don't think I'll be here next
Monday?
Next Monday, because I plan to be in New York with Randy Bell visiting some Joseph Smith sites and doing some treasure digging of our own.
For how long are you going to be there?
The plan is for a couple of days.
Okay, because I was going to say, I also have a date with Randy Bell a few days later in another area of the U.S. So,
well, where are you going with Randy Bell?
I'm hoping that we're not overlapping. Yeah, Randy he's the one. I'll tell you about it afterwards. It'll be interesting.
Few things are more fun than overlapping Randy.
I love it. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. And don't forget to like and subscribe to anywhere you happen to find us. I've lost track of where we all are at this point. And we will see you all next week on the Mormon Newscast. Thanks, everybody.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.